Hey Garth, how's it going, buddy?
Great, Jason. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Incredible. Wrapping up a triad of podcasts. This was real highlight for me to get to meet Grant and talk to him. You've known him for a long time though, and
Yeah.
what an inspirational guy.
Yeah, there's so many things we pull out of this. It's fantastic, and it was great to actually re-listen to this too, but given the the context of the times and all these great things. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. What stood out for you, Jason? Like, where do you want to go with this cold open?
Well, I want to ask you a question. As always, we kind of pass this back and forth. Garth, if your leadership was an animal, what animal would it be?
If my leadership was an animal, what animal would it be? Um, uh, can you give me a second on this? Because I
Yeah,
have a
man,
great answer.
I actually really like that I stumped you. So
It's not so
let's
much that
sit
you
in
stump me. It's
the.
just I want to make sure it's the right one. I want to make sure it's the right one. Um, I'm gonna say that if my leadership style had an animal, I would want it to probably be a wolf.
All right, all right. What about the wolf? Give people 30 seconds on why wolf.
Um, in the seven sacred teachings, this is what I was looking up. In the seven sacred teachings, the wolf is the representation of humility. And also, I talk about how wolves change rivers in this upcoming podcast, where leaders don't have to be that out the front person. They're actually stewards of their organization. They lead with humility, which means that they understand the value of listening to others, of hearing others, of respecting others, and lifting other people up. And I love that. Um, the way that indigenous peoples in these seven sacred teachings position the wolf, which a lot of people look at as the apex predator, but they're actually such a beautiful picture of how to work together in a team, and that we rely on the pack. So yeah, what about you, Jason?
Oh well, I've got an answer for this one. I have a picture in my office at work of a group of muskox, and they're
Oh.
running, and it's from this photographer in Banff, and I've always had it there, and there's something so inspiring about it. You just see them, and the leader in that group, his tongue is hanging out, and you can actually see it in the photograph. And I always thought, isn't it an interesting idea that like the muskox, they're not big and they're not, or they are big, but they're not fast, but they do move as a group. And then as I looked into them further, when they're under challenge, they're almost indefeatable. They all put their back ends together and stand in a circle, and not even the most powerful pack of wolves can get to them because they've created this circle of trust. And so I've
Mm,
always had this like metaphor in my mind that, we are steadily moving forward as a pack, as a leader. I've got to, be in front, but not that far ahead. I have to prove, that I'm working as hard and as diligently as everybody else. And when we end up under threat, we do need a strong circle of trust. And so I've always kind of been a bit of a muskox in leadership. The walking slowly bit that's real,
yeah.
and I think the muskox actually probably walk slowly, but they run when they need to. So
Oh,
that's my animal, Garth.
I love it. Oh,
Okay,
that's
so
so good. So we talk a lot about some animals throughout this last three
yeah,
episodes, T-Rex, like all of these things,
it's a
and
zoo
I
in
pull it
here.
into wolves, and now we've got muskox to add to that. So thank you, Jason, for that. Listeners, we hope you enjoy this episode. We wrap up, we pull out Portrait of the Graduate, we pull out the significance of it, and we also talk about the role that leaders play in today's age, particularly in education and beyond, about creating the conditions and how might we create conditions for experimentation to make sure that our North Star remains our North Star. So we hope you enjoy.
Folks, enjoy the show.
Lassoing leadership sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow.
Welcome back to Lassoing Leadership. We are in season 3 of Beard's Book Club, where we're taking authors of books and really trying to understand leadership in today's context, how it's changed over time, and how we can actually bring that to us. So today we are wrapping up our incredible conversation with my friend and now Jason's friend, Grant Lichtman. The book is called Thrive. And if you're watching us, Jason's just showing it off there. Amazing. So my name is Garth Nichols. I'm head of school at Kingsway College School in Toronto, Canada. And as always, joined by my co-host, Jason Rogers. Jason, where are you at, my friend?
Oh, Garth, I'm so excited for this podcast. That's exactly where I'm at because we had a great conversation in the opener.
Yeah,
I just love talking to Grant. I hope people just leaned into his wisdom throughout the course of that podcast. I mean, obviously Grant has seen more in schools and in change and in life than any of us ever will, and he's just the river runs deep, is what I would say with Grant, and I'm excited to be back with you to really start to unpack some of
yeah.
these ideas about, how do we thrive, how do we adapt, how do we change, what is innovation's role, what's Portrait of the Graduate, what are we learning in our own spaces, maybe even why don't we change sometimes
Mm,
in our schools. So I think those are some of the big topics we're gonna jump into. But I remember, Garth, in the first podcast, you talked about Portrait of a Graduate. Now, I've been
yeah,
sitting curiously by since we talked, and I wanted you to get into tell our listeners a little bit more about Portrait of Graduate, because on one level it could be like the picture behind me, where
yeah,
it's just a picture, but is it
yeah.
that, Garth, or is it more dynamic, and how do you see that?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of things that Grant mentioned here about the marketplace of education, it being so diverse and all of
Mhm.
these, lots of choices for families. And how do we articulate a unique value proposition? And many schools have what's called a portrait of a graduate. And even
Mhm.
that concept has changed over time. So I think maybe 5, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you would have seen a portrait of the graduates as this, like, we're done, this is
Mhm.
where they're going, right? Here's what we've accomplished in the graduating class is going, here's where they're going post-secondary, here's where they're
Yeah.
going, into the workforce or whatever you want. That has changed to actually no longer be looking backwards, or that's that point of like, you're gone. It's more like, how are we as schools setting students up for success in the future? And so portraits of a graduate are characteristics, qualities, dispositions that we as schools, sitting on top of our foundation of excellent academics, that we inculcate into our students to thrive in the future. And so this is the added value of why you would want to send your son, daughter, or child to Rundle School, for example, Rundle Academy. Yeah.
And so when you think locally, give our listeners a couple examples of what are the components of the Portrait of the Graduate at Kingsway College, so people can put this in
Yeah.
context for yourself. But also, I want school leaders to sit back and think about, like, I hope they look up Portrait of the Graduate. I hope they do this deep thinking on their own, and maybe even start to share that with their students and their broader community. If you were to talk about Kingsway and their portrait, what would we see?
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about it broadly first and foremost. So, um, there are many different ways of going about this, and as Grant said, schools need to have a North Star that they're aiming towards. And so, Portrait of a Graduate isn't just what happens in grade 12. It's actually, as I said in the opening podcast, it's actually JK all the way through. How are we building these skills and dispositions? And so, our Portrait of the Grad. Well, let me talk about a couple of them. So we call ours at Kingsway College School Portrait of a Grad. My previous school, Havergal College, it's portrait of it's called the Havergal Difference Maker, and it's directly tied to the mission, vision, values. And I was really privileged and honored to have a role in that. And another example would be Bishop Strawn School in Toronto, signature of a graduate. So they're called a whole bunch of different things, and it is in one way it's a marketing tool. Externally, it's like, to our audience, to our market, this is who we are. Internally, it becomes a reference point for major projects, major decisions that are being made. How can these decisions enhance our value proposition, as in the Portrait of a Grad? So like, one of the reasons I came to Kingsway College School was their Portrait of a Grad, what they believe in. And so KCS graduates stand out for their readiness to embrace life's challenges and opportunities in an ever-changing world. Like, that's what we stand out for. We are ready to embrace these challenges and opportunities. We understand that the world is changing. And so we've got 6 qualities there: future ready students, so that they're equipped with skills, work habits, experience, mentorships, networks, even to excel in post-secondary and beyond. We really want to make sure that our students understand the value and the skills and the habits of mind to be driven lifelong learners,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
This is something that, like, that's an ethos that I live by, right? Lifelong
Hmm.
learning. So
Totally.
how do we are developing curiosity, open-mindedness, persistence in the face of challenge. We also have respectful and effective leaders leading with empathy, ingenuity, insight, like meaningful goals, self-driven. We're responsible risk takers. So we have courage, resilience, adaptable, resourceful. We're empathetic and compassionate citizens. Our first book in season 3 of Beard's Book Club was outraged,
Yeah.
right? We need our students in every school to be empathetic and compassionate citizens, to understand productive doubt, to understand that they may not have all the answers, and be open to understanding and disagreeing,
Yeah.
being open to
Yeah.
understanding, but also like, yeah, I can now integrate that into my worldview. And then finally, and I think, it goes without saying that we want our graduates to all their way through Kingsway College School, but then into the beyond, is to really have a mind towards physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, intellectual health, right? Where we thrive wherever life takes us. And we have the skills, both internal, and we have the networks external, to maintain a level of health, buoyancy, if you will. Yeah, that's a lot. Thanks for letting me talk about our portrait of God. What about you, Jason? Anything resonate with you, or anything that you look at Rundle and be like, oh yeah, that's in ours too?
Oh, I'm just, I'm blown away, Garth, in the fact that, you're in your first 2 months at Kingsway and you speak about the Porch of the Grad like you've owned it forever. And I think that's a true attribute to you and to your
I love it.
community and the
Yeah.
strength of it. I think that's what I take away from your Portrait of Grad. And I really believe that, it is coming from you as a leader at that school and obviously, the leaders who were before you. Um, yeah, Rundle, it's like really simple in my mind. Like kind, curious, well, those are our values, led out by togetherness. So we want students who embody those things. Like we always say, character comes first at Rundle, and I think that's where we live. And the other thing we're thinking about right now, just to be really punchy about it, is leading and serving. And I think we're talking about how does that look in the world? Leading and serving. And so we really want our students to lead through kind, compassionate, purposeful leadership, and giving back either through leadership or through volunteerism or any of these things. And so at Rundle, we want our graduates to leave the school ready to lead and serve in an
Nice.
ever-changing world. And so that's a portrait as I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when all of our schools, and Jason, I've been to your school, it's incredible. All the different campuses, the faculty that you have, but all of our schools, and I think this applies to businesses outside of the educational industry too, would say that, you found your place where you say, oh, I really fit in here. I belong here. And that
Mm-hmm.
cultural fit. And it is not only how you tell your story, but how you back that up too, right? What are
Mm-hmm.
the programs? What are the moments that you make? What are the mantras that you map, which I keep
Mm-hmm.
going back to, Jason? I love that. That really reinforce that you're driving towards these ends. So, and that's what we talked about with Grant too, right? Like this idea of like make your school irresistible to
Mm-hmm.
others. And
Yes.
so you also want to be clear what your school is not too, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is important too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I've been thinking about this part a lot, Garth, because I think a lot of us feel compelled to change because the world is moving so fast. And I think, when we read books like this, we think about innovation, we think about change. Sometimes we feel that pressure that we've got to move quicker, we've got to be a little bit farther ahead. But I think what's lost in some of the conversation, if I was to be a little bit, critical, skeptical about our last series of podcasts, is like, change doesn't always have to be the case. And sometimes what we do is good enough. And I think, and as leaders or as organizations, I think we have to lean into that. And it does remind me of going to MIT last year on a school tour and visit.
Yeah,
Have
tell
you
us
ever
about
been
that.
to Have you ever been to MIT or on campus, Edgar?
The Massachusetts Institute for Technology. I've never
Yeah.
been.
Yeah, just like a little sample, and this for our listeners. What do you think you would see first when you went onto MIT's campus? I want you to what would you expect the experience to be like?
Well, to I would expect it to be their big concrete buildings,
Mm-hmm.
um, large grass fields.
Mm-hmm.
MIT is not known for its football team, so I don't know if,
Mm-hmm.
if there'd be a large sports culture there or not. But I do think that you would walk in and you would see examples of the successful graduates who have come through MIT and their impact on the world. That's what I would expect.
Cool. And that is good. Like what I was expecting was to see a bunch of engineering, a bunch of robotics, a bunch of technology, like
Okay.
really innovative, advanced labs everywhere, all those things. And they certainly live at MIT. There's no question. We got to see some incredible lab spaces and some engineering going on there. But what I saw first was a banner that said "Art lives here,"
Mm.
and I thought to myself, that's not what I was expecting. That was literally the first thing. And then when I got into the MIT program, I learned a couple things I didn't expect. So first and foremost, when you go to MIT, you don't enter to a specific discipline, computer science, engineering. You do a 1 year of, what I would call is a liberal arts focused education, where you
Yeah.
go across all of art. You look at philosophy, you look at mathematics, you look at all of, and then after that, you decide, do you want to go into a specific pursuit? And
Yeah.
I just love that because they know who they are. This is who we are. This is our core program in the first year. We are not adapting and changing. And then when you get into those other programs, certainly there's going to be innovation. There's going to be the top,
Yeah.
but this is who we are. And I think, I just think back to if MIT can do it, one of the greatest schools in the world, do we not need to define our core and stick to it and then scale from there? And that's really what I learned
Yeah.
from my visit at MIT.
Yeah. And I think too, a portrait of the grad serves that purpose. So it keeps the guardrails up. And so you're not being a victim to the different winds of change that we hear in schools, that we're not all of a sudden, all of our schools aren't all of a sudden jumping on generative AI and becoming a generative AI school and all of these things. Same could be said for, becoming an athletic school. We are all trying to figure out, and the Portrait of Grad serves this purpose. What is our unique value proposition? And how do we make that unique value proposition relevant over time? And if you look at,
Yes.
and if you look at, if you look at certain sports, if you look at certain industries, there's a core that's maintained, but you have to, good leaders integrate modernity, for lack of a better term, integrate technology in ways that allow their core, their unique value proposition to thrive and flourish and be relevant in the future.
Yeah, I think that's key to thriving, Garth, honestly, is like knowing who you are, knowing where you're going, and knowing that the proximal range of innovation that your organization can stand. And we didn't talk about it all so much with the intro or even with Grant, but he talks about Cotter a fair bit in the book, and I think you may have even introduced Grant to Cotter and his work, and I think a lot of that shines through in Cotter's kind of models of change as well. So
Yeah,
I
and
think
Cotter is a cultural piece around how do you make innovation and sustain it and protect innovation as part of your organization in meaningful ways. But Jason, one thing that came up in the podcast, we talked a little bit about Tyrannosaurus Rex and all these other things, but I think where I'd like to turn the conversation to now is what's the role of the leader in change management? So what were some things that stood out to you from Grant about the role of the leader in all this?
Well, I think Grant says it pretty clearly in the book and in the interviews. Like you have to set the North Star and understand what that is and head toward it. And I think the leader, I think, remains fixed on that and is willing to go along the river, if you will. As it ebbs and flows, you keep your team together heading in that direction. I think first of all, understanding context. Secondly, setting the North Star. And third, setting up the structures that allow you to get to that North Star. And probably fourth is like building teams that can sustain the work that is going to require you to, make those changes. So I think that's what I take away from Grant, from the leader's perspective. Certainly a lot more in there. What do you take away, Garth? What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the things that I loved from this was when Grant talks about, and I think it's worth going back to listening to as well, that leaders create the conditions to experiment, to take risks, so that faculty, staff, so they can adapt to their best teaching. It's not something that's top down, but you create this environment for classrooms to be in spaces of innovation, where you create business departments to be spaces of innovation. And this really goes back to, we referenced in the podcast with Grant, it goes back to our work in 2015, where we talked about how do schools innovate. We published a paper, top 10 areas of academic innovation, top 10 areas of business innovation. But what it reminded me of was that like we need leaders, and he talks about this. We need leaders who are learning, who are constantly learning about systems and structures and change management. And you say in the podcast the like these different concepts of leadership, like the great man theory, these are
Mhm.
extinct.
Mhm.
Leadership can be learned. And so one thing which it brought to mind when I was listening to it was this great podcast or great YouTube concept called How Wolves Change Rivers, and goes through the reintroduction of wolves back into Yellowstone.
No
And
doubt.
and because they were removed, because they thought wolves, they're the apex predator. They're going to take away, they're going to hunt the buffalo. They're going
Yeah.
to take away the deer and all these things. But actually, the reintroduction of wolves brought it back to life, like brought back different ecosystems, brought back wildflowers that hadn't been there for ages. And the notion is like you as a leader can make small changes throughout the organization that allows the organization to be that place for experimentation, for ingenuity, for creativity, and ultimately for innovation that speaks to your and enhances your portrait of Brad, your North Star. And so this is the frame that Grant leaves us with, which is that the process is the
Mhm.
product, because
Mhm.
students are
Mhm.
always
Mhm.
watching, right? The process. Watch as my teacher doesn't just teach from a lesson out of the can. Watch as my teacher tries something new and labels this as, hey, we're going to try something different today. So I really really loved that part of the podcast. Yeah.
Wow, the medium is the message and the
Mm,
process is the product. Garth Nichols, that's well done. I think that's
yeah.
a great bow on this
Yeah.
triad.
Yeah. We hope you
Um,
enjoyed it.
oh man, and let's tease for a second before we drop off the next one. Okay, Garth, I'm going to
Yeah.
say a name, and then I want you to tell our listeners why they should get excited about Dr. David Yeager. What do they have to look forward to in the next series? Let's talk about the book and let's talk about the interview quickly. What are
Yeah.
we in
Sure.
for?
Yeah, Dr. David Yeager, 10 to 25. He is provocative. He's real talk. He is concerned about our youth. And I think the main provocation I want to leave our listeners with to get them to get this book, especially if you're in education or especially if you're hiring millennials, is that the communication problems that we have, maybe it's our fault, not theirs. The leadership issues that we have, maybe it's our fault, not theirs. And he just flips the script on what leadership can do in terms of communication and understanding of new generations coming up. Oh, it's fantastic.
Get this book, listen to it, read it, do whatever you do. He
Yeah,
studied under Duckworth. He
yeah,
studied under Dweck, and he is out there forging a path ahead in the mentor mindset. And it's not
yeah,
as simple as it sounds, but it is transformational and profound. And Yeager brings it about 2 weeks from now. You're in for a wild ride on the podcast. I can't wait for people to hear that one.
yeah. So thanks, listeners. Until next time, keep reading and leading the lasso way. Thanks, folks.
Right on.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, everybody.
Grab your coffee, grab your seat. It's time to learn, it's time to meet. Garth and Jason setting the tone. Leadership lessons to take back.